Hello, wonderful people. Happy Sabbath day. I hope you're doing well. There we go. I wanted to read to you today a little brief history about the Illuminati and Freemasonry and George Washington. There seems to be like a lot of confusion out there. And I'm not saying that this is like 100% correct, but I'm just going to go off of historical documents because that's the best that I can do. So I want to clear up some confusion regarding the Illuminati and Freemasonry. And also, if for all you like parents out there who are thinking about homeschooling, you can do it. Definitely do it. These I would highly recommend. Story of the World, to teach history, to teach world history, history of man, and includes Bible history. And as we should all know by now, the Bible is definitely the best historical book that you can read in the world. Even if you're not a Christian, it is the best source of history of mankind. So, the Illuminati and Freemasonry, they used to be separate. Did you know that? Let's get into the history of both real quick, and then we'll dive into the Bible. Freemasons versus Illuminati, unmasking the truth behind secret societies. They are often spoken of in the same breath, portrayed as two heads of a single shadowy beast pulling the strings of world events. The real story is not one of a unified plot, but of two distinct organizations with vastly different origins, goals, and legacies. And from my research is my understanding that the Freemasons were a benevolent organization at first. At its heart, Freemasonry is one of the world's oldest and largest secular fraternal organizations. Its origins are traced by historians to the stonemason guilds that built the great cathedrals and castles of Europe during the Middle Ages. These operative masons had secrets of the trade, including methods of geometry and engineering, which they protected fiercely. Over time, as the need for cathedral building waned, these guilds began accepting non-operative members, men of learning and influence who were interested in the moral and philosophical lessons of the craft. And this is probably where it went wrong. This transition gave rise to what is known as the speculative Freemasonry in the 17th and 18th centuries. The tools of the stonemason, like the square, compasses, and level, were transformed into symbols for building a better self. Freemasonry describes itself as a system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. Its central tenets revolve around the core principles of brotherly love, relief, and truth. It encourages its members, known as brothers, to focus on self-improvement, support one another and their communities through charity, and seek a more profound understanding of their place in the universe. It is not a religion, as it has no specific theology, but it does require its members to believe in a supreme being. However, they choose to conceive of that entity for centuries. Now, the Illuminati. The Order of the Illuminati was founded on May 1st, 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a German professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria. Weishaupt was a man of the Enlightenment, deeply influenced by the era's emphasis on reason, secularism, and opposition to the abuses of power by both the state and the church. He envisioned a secret society that would work to enlighten humanity, free it from the shackles of superstition and religious dogma. So already you can see that it's conflicting with Freemasonry. And ultimately create a new world order based on rational thought and liberty. His goals were explicitly political and revolutionary for the time. His organization, whose name means the Enlightened Ones, was designed to be a truly clandestine group. Members used classical pseudonyms, a complex hierarchical structure, and a system of ciphers to communicate and avoid detection by the absolutist Bavarian authorities. Weishaupt's Illuminati sought to place its members in positions of influence and power, not for personal gain, but to subtly steer society towards its radical ideas. In 1785, the government issued edicts that banned all secret societies, including the Illuminati and Freemasons. The order was infiltrated, its secrets were exposed, and its members were arrested or forced to flee. And this is where America comes in. By 1787, the Bavarian Illuminati had been effectively dismantled. They just really went underground. Weishaupt himself became a Freemason in 1777, a year after founding his own order. He saw the established network of Mason lodges as the perfect recruiting ground for his more radical cause. Okay, so that's just a quick little background. So now we have America is being founded, correct? Around that same time? As the Illuminati in Bavaria was being pushed out, a man named G.W. Snyder wrote a letter to George Washington. Some news about the Illuminati infiltrating the Freemasons. I believe it was around 1,000 people that Weishaupt was able to recruit out of the Freemasons. So it was becoming common knowledge about what was going on because the Freemasons was already established here in America at that time. So on August 22nd, 1798, G.W. Snyder wrote a letter to George Washington. Sir, you will, I hope, not think it is presumption in a stranger whose name perhaps never reached your ears to address himself to you, the commanding general of a great nation. I am a German, born and liberally educated in the city of Heidelberg and the Palatinate of Rhine. I came to this country in 1776 and felt soon after my arrival a close attachment to the liberty for which these Confederate states then struggled. The same attachment still remains, not glowing, but burning in my breast. At the same time, I am exulting in the measures adopted by our government. I feel myself elevated in the idea of my adopted country. I am attached both from the bent of education and mature inquiry and search to the simple doctrines of Christianity, which I have the honor to teach in public. And I do heartily despise all the cavils of infidelity. Our present time, pregnant with the most shocking evils and calamities, threatens ruin to our liberty and government. The most secret plans are in agitation, plans calculated to ensnare the unwary, to attract the gay and irreligious, and to entice even the well-disposed to combine in the general machine for overturning all government and all religion. It was some time since that a book fell into my hands, entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robison, which gives a full account of the Society of Freemasons that distinguishes itself by the name of Illuminati, whose plan is to overturn all government and all religion, even natural, and who endeavor to eradicate every idea of a supreme being and distinguish man from beast by his shape only. A thought suggested itself to me that some of the lodges in the United States might have caught the infection and might cooperate with the Illuminati or the Jacobin Club in France. So it wasn't just in Bavaria, it was also going on in France at the Jacobin Club. Fauché is mentioned by Robison as a zealous member, and who can doubt of Genet and Adet? Have not these their confidence in this country? They use the same expressions and are generally men of no religion. Upon serious reflection, I was led to think that it might be within your power to prevent the horrid plan from corrupting the brethren of the English Lodge over which you preside. I send you the proof of a conspiracy, which I doubt not will give you satisfaction and afford you matter for a train of ideas that may operate to our national felicity. If, however, you have already perused the book, it will not, I trust, be disagreeable to you that I have presumed to address you with this letter and the book accompanying it. It proceeded from the sincerity of my heart and my ardent wishes for the common good. May the supreme ruler of all things continue you long with us in these perilous times. May he endow you with strength and wisdom to save our country in the threatening storms and gathering clouds of factions and commotions. And after you have completed his work on his terrene spot, may he bring you to the full possession of the glorious liberty of the children of God, is the hearty and most sincere wish for your Excellency's very humble and devoted servant, G.W. Snyder. So all these rumors about George Washington being Illuminati, or that the Freemasons was evil at inception, I don't believe them whatsoever, because the historical documents say otherwise. Freemasons was by all means a righteous organization that was infiltrated later on. I don't believe George Washington was compromised by the Illuminati, not for 1 second. If you read his history, the kind of man he was, you wouldn't believe it either. This is a man who befriended the American Indians when he came over. He basically led a band of misfits to overthrow an empire and take this land. So, no, I don't believe that Freemasons were always evil, and I don't believe that George Washington was in the Illuminati either. But let's keep going. In May of this year, Snyder published in Philadelphia The Age of Reason Unreasonable, or The Folly of Rejecting Revealed Religion. John Robison's Proof of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, published in Philadelphia in 1798, was in George Washington's library at his death. This letter from Snyder initiated a flurry of correspondence between him and George Washington. George Washington replied on the 25th of September, "Sir, many apologies are due to you for my not acknowledging the receipt of your obliging favor of the 22nd ulto, and for not thanking you at an earlier period for the book you had the goodness to send me. I have heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati, but never saw the book until you were pleased to send it to me. The same causes which have prevented my acknowledging the receipt of your letter have prevented my reading the book hitherto, namely, the multiplicity of matters which pressed upon me before, and the debilitated state in which I was left after a severe fever had been removed." You have to remember they spoke differently, and I hope that you're able to understand all of this. I'm trying to read it slowly. But words, like gay had a different meaning back then. Apparently he was ill. And you have to understand George Washington was an incredibly busy man. So he's apologizing just because it took him less than 4 weeks to reply, and he's still apologizing. These were good men. You guys, these were really good, righteous men, our founding fathers, the majority of them. There were a handful of wicked ones. That's why slavery was allowed in the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't written in it originally. It was added because a handful of wicked delegates, both from the North and the South, refused to go to war with England. And they needed all the colonies for this revolution. Man, public school is such a big problem, you guys. Anyway, let's get back to the letter from George Washington, and which allows me to add little more now than thanks for your kind wishes and favorable sentiments, except to correct an error you have run into of my presiding over the English lodges in this country. The fact is, I preside over none, nor have I been in one more than once or twice within the last 30 years. I believe, notwithstanding, that none of the lodges in this country are contaminated with the principles ascribed to the Society of the Illuminati. With respect, I am, Sir, your obet, humble servant, George Washington. Not having heard from George Washington, Snyder wrote George Washington again on the 1st of October from Frederick. And it takes a while for mail to travel by horse. So he hadn't heard from him, and he wrote a follow-up letter. This was before he received George Washington's letter. Some weeks ago, I sent you a letter with Robinson's Proof of a Conspiracy, which I hope you have received. I have since been more confirmed in the ideas I had suggested to you concerning an order of men who in Germany have distinguished themselves by the names of Illuminati, German Union, reading societies, and in France by that of the Jacobin Club, that the same are now existing in the United States. It also occurred to me that you might have had ideas to that purport when you disapproved of the meetings of the democratic societies, which appeared to me to be a branch of that order. Though many members may be entirely ignorant of the plan, those men who are so much attached to French principles have all the marks of Jacobinism. They first cast off all religious restraints and then became fit for perpetrating every act of inhumanity, and it is remarkable that most of them are actually scoffers at all religious principles. It is said that the Lodge Theodore in Bavaria became notorious for the many bold and dangerous sentiments in religion and politics that were uttered in their harangues, and its members were remarkable for their zeal in making proselytes, and no wonder, since the order was to rule the world. Is not there a striking similarity between their proceedings and those of many societies that oppose the measures of our present government? Even in this small place, the French faction is very numerous. Their expressions are like those of bloody Lutetia, Parisiorum, or Paris. And if you haven't seen what Paris has been doing, these wicked, evil, demonic, giant animatronics, this nude female, I believe it's Lilith, that they've been parading in the streets of Paris. Holy moly. Yeah, France apparently has had a problem with Satanism for a very long time. Their sentiments in exact unison with those of the Jacobin Club, their hearts panting for faggots and guillotines, the foundation of their sanctuary is laid with lies, and every stone of the superstructure reared with falsehood. They are laboriously employed to excite discord, to extinguish public virtue, to break down the barriers of religion, to establish atheism, and work the downfall of our civil and religious liberty. Should their perfidious scheme succeed, I tremble even at the imagination of the consequences. What would become of our Columbia? George Washington responded on the 10th of October, "Sir, it is more than a fortnight since I acknowledged the receipt of your first letter on the subject of the Illuminati and thanked you for Robinson's account of that society. It went to the post office as usual, addressed to the Reverend Mr. Snyder at Fredericktown, Maryland. If it had not been received before this mishap, must have attended it, of which I pray you to advise me, as it could not have been received at the date of your last, not being mentioned. I am George Washington." On 17th of October, Snyder wrote George Washington, "Your Excellency's favor of the 25th of September, last I had the pleasure to receive on the 3rd, current. My pleasure, however, was interrupted because I had sent another letter, dated October 1st, for Your Excellency to the post office about an hour before I received yours." After further pleasantries, Snyder goes on to write, "I should be very happy in Your Excellency's good opinion that the contagion of Illuminatism or Jacobinism had not yet reached this country. But when I consider the anarchical, and seditious spirit that shewed itself in the United States from the time M. Genet and Fauché, who certainly is of the order, arrived in this country and propagated their seditious doctrines, which the illuminated doctor from Birmingham has been zealously employed to strengthen, I confess I cannot divest myself of my suspicions, yet I trust that the all-wise and omnipotent ruler of the universe will so dispose the minds of the people of these United States that true religion and righteous government may remain the privileges of this nation. I cannot conclude without acquainting Your Excellency that I have made extracts from Robinson's proof of a conspiracy and arranged them in such a manner as to give a compendious information to the public of the dangerous and pernicious plan of the Illuminati, or Jacobins, and by some remarks to caution them against it. I had them published in Bart G's Federal Gazette of this place, from which they were copied and inserted into the Baltimore Federal Gazette on the 19th. I write under the signature of Cicero, whether my endeavors shall benefit the public, time alone evince. Harm I am conscious I do not design. Should your excellency have leisure to pursue the peace, I shall deem it a peculiar favor to receive your opinion upon it. George Washington's response from Mount Vernon on the 24th of October brought the exchange to a close. Reverend Sir, I have your favor of the 17th instant before me, and my only motive to trouble you with the receipt of this letter is to explain and correct a mistake which I perceive the hurry in which I am obliged often to write letters have led you into. It's not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and principles of Jacobinism had not spread into the United States. On the contrary, no one is more fully satisfied of this fact than I am. The idea I meant to convey was that I do not believe that the lodges of Freemasons in this country have, as societies, endeavored to propagate the diabolical tenets of the first or the pernicious principles of the latter, if they are susceptible of separation. That individuals of them may have done it, and that the founder or instrument employed to found the democratic societies in the United States may have had these objects and actually had a separation of the people from their government and views is too evident to be questioned. My occupations are such that but little leisure is allowed me to read newspapers or books of any kind. The reading of letters and preparing answers absorb much of my time. With respect, I remain, Reverend Sir, your most obedient, humble servant, George Washington. So George Washington wasn't aware of the infiltration. He was aware that members of the Illuminati were in the country, but he was not aware of any of the lodges being infiltrated at that time. And he wasn't like a faithful member of Freemasons either. I'd like to read to you George Washington's prayer for his country. This prayer is read aloud each day at Mount Vernon's public wreath-laying ceremony. I now make it my earnest prayer that God would have the United States in his holy protection, that he would incline the hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to government, to entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another, for their fellow citizens of the United States at large, and particularly for their brethren who have served in the field, and finally, that he would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, and without an humble imitation of whose example in these things we can never hope to be a happy nation. Amen.